Now that you're familiar with the basic zones on the mode dial, let's take a look at the creative shooting modes. The first mode is called Programmed AE mode, and it's represented with a P on the mode dial. The P stands for program and the AE for auto exposure. In this mode, the camera automatically adjusts shutter speed and aperture for optimal exposure. Use this mode when you want to leave the camera in charge of shutter speed and aperture. To operate in this mode, turn the mode dial to P, press the shutter button halfway down to activate the viewfinder. To monitor the aperture and exposure settings, look through the viewfinder, hold the shutter halfway down to focus, then press the shutter all the way to take the picture. Before we discuss the creative shooting modes further, it's important to understand a little more about shutter speeds and ISO settings. In the creative shooting modes, access is gained to ISO settings, aperture, and shutter speed settings. The shutter speed on your camera ranges from 30 to 1/4000th, meaning the shutter opens from 30 seconds to 1/4000th of a second. Choosing a correct shutter speed for the appropriate situation can help you add depth and creativity to your pictures. Shutter speeds have a range of very fast to very slow. Let's talk about these speeds in depth for a moment. The most frequently used shutter speeds lie within the range of about 1/500th to 1/60th of a second. This is a typical range used for everyday picture taking. Camera speeds slower than 1/60th will normally require a tripod to avoid blurring the entire picture. Faster shutter speeds are found in the range of 1/500th to 1/8000th. The LCD monitor displays the shutter speed as a fraction. Within the viewfinder, shutter speed is indicated with just the bottom number of the fraction. A fast shutter speed of 1/2000th to 1/4000th of a second could be used to freeze the wings of a bee or the blades of a helicopter in flight. A shutter speed of 1/500th to 1/1000th would be good for freezing action at a sporting event. A moderate shutter speed of 1/125th to 1/500th could be used for taking portraits of friends or family. If you'd like to slow things down and capture the effects of motion or blur the movement of a waterfall, select a slow shutter speed in the range of about 8 to 30 seconds. The ISO setting affects the image sensor's sensitivity to light. The higher the number, the less light that is required to properly expose the image sensor. You can either have the camera automatically choose the sensitivity or you can set it manually. It's a good idea to set the ISO speed to suit the ambient light setting that you're shooting in. When you increase the ISO speed to a higher number for low light, a faster shutter speed can be used to avoid camera shake. Set the ISO speed by pressing the ISO button, and while looking at the LCD panel, turn the main dial or cross keys to set the desired ISO speed and press the set button. Keep in mind that a higher ISO setting may introduce noise or grain into your images. An ISO setting that is too high for the shooting conditions will make the image lose quality, and you might even start to see particles in your pictures. Experiment with ISO settings to become more familiar with their range and control. The image sensor on your camera is very powerful. It gives you the flexibility to shoot in low light conditions and still get amazing pictures. The next setting on the mode dial is the TV, or Shutter Priority Mode. The TV stands for Time Value. Use this mode when you want to set the shutter speed and have the camera automatically select the correct aperture value. Set the mode dial to TV. Hold the shutter button halfway down and use the main dial to set the shutter speed. You can view the shutter speed and aperture values through the camera's viewfinder or on the back LCD panel. The next setting on the mode dial is AV, or the Aperture Value mode. When shooting in this mode, you'll set the aperture value and then the camera will calculate the shutter speed necessary for a proper exposure. Select this mode when you want to create a long or short depth of field. To use this mode, set the mode dial to AV and press the shutter button halfway down. Turn the main dial to select an aperture value as you watch the display through the viewfinder. Once you have made your selection, press the shutter button to take the picture. When the f-stop is set to a small number, the aperture has a large opening, letting in more light, creating a short depth of field. This blurs the background and foreground. When the f-stop is set to a large number, the aperture has a small opening, letting in a small amount of light, creating a long depth of field. This keeps the background and foreground in sharp focus. Remember, you can change the ISO setting to make your image more or less sensitive to light to match the ambient light you're shooting in. The next advanced shooting mode is manual, or M mode. This mode gives you complete control of the camera. In manual mode, you will set the shutter speed, aperture, and ISO to create the exposure. To operate the camera in manual mode, rotate the mode dial to M. To set the shutter speed, turn the main dial. To set the aperture, hold down the AV plus/minus button near the top right of the LCD and rotate the main dial. Press the shutter halfway. The exposure setting will be displayed in the viewfinder and on the LCD panel. The exposure level mark lets you see how far away you are from a standard exposure level. Check the exposure level and set the desired shutter speed and aperture. The A-depth setting is short for Automatic Depth of Field Auto Exposure. In this setting, the objects in the foreground and background will be in focus automatically. All the AF points will function to detect the subject, and the aperture required to attain the necessary depth of field will be set automatically. When shooting in A-depth mode, all of the subjects covered in the AF points flashing in red will be in focus.